Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Live from the State Capitol webinar. We'll just give you a few minutes to log in to join us, and then we will get started in about a minute or two. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Live from the State Capitol. Today with us are Melanie Willoughby, our Chief Government Affairs Officer, and Andrew Musick, Director of Tax and Economic Development. Today, Melanie and Andrew will discuss the fiscal year 16 state budget, which goes into effect today and was debated by the legislature and signed by the governor last week. We'll talk about the millionaire's tax, the corporate business tax, the earned income tax credit, and how this year's pension debate shook out. Also the latest on the out-of-network healthcare coverage debate. And of course, we'll discuss yesterday's big announcement by Governor Christie at Livingston High School. A few housekeeping matters before we begin. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you automatically in the next day or so. Also, we will be emailing you the slides for today's presentation in a separate email, so be on the lookout for those. And a new feature today, you may notice on your screen that the hyperlink to the slides appears in the webinar platform section of your screen, so you can feel free to download those slides yourself rather than waiting for us to email them to you. Lastly, after Melanie and Andrew complete their presentations, they will be taking all of your questions. So now, let's get things started with Melanie Willoughby. Melanie?
Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everyone. I'd really like to start this morning with an overview of our Government Affairs Department of NJBIA and how we serve you, our member companies. With New Jersey having such an active legislature, NJBIA fortunately has 6 advocates for business on the team who are experts in their fields, where they cover tax, economic development, workers' compensation, employment and labor policy, and energy and the environment. And Andrew Musick, our advocate for tax and economic development, as you know, is with us today, and you will be hearing more from him later. It is our job here at NJBIA to be in constant contact with the legislators and their staff, plus the administration and the state departments, and we monitor all the legislative and regulatory activity that happens here in Trenton. We are your watchdog on all business issues. And the New Jersey legislature is actually considered to be part-time. I know, isn't that funny? But they meet every Monday and Thursday throughout the year, except for usually July and August, when all lobbyists take their vacation. So really, you know, they can get in a lot of mischief in that amount of time, and they usually do. So we're here to represent you and every size business, from the sole proprietor to the large corporation, and in every possible industry. And just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the number of bills we have to deal with, why we track over 3,000 bills in a year, everything from mandated paid sick leave to the proposed increases in taxes. Before I turn to the big announcement this week, I just want everyone to know that we have added to our NJBIA lobbying team. Mary Beaumont, Assistant Commissioner with Banking and Insurance, is now going to be coming on to NJBIA starting July 6th, and she will be our new Vice President for Health and Legal Affairs. And we're very excited to have her on board, and please don't call her until July 7th because we'll be doing her orientation on July 6th, and then she'll start taking your health and legal issue questions. Now, let me turn to the big announcement of the week. Governor Chris Christie announced on Tuesday that he is officially launching a presidential campaign. Now, we all suspected that was going to be happening, but it's now official. He made the announcement in the gym of Livingston High School, his alma mater. And he said that holding the announcement there was an easy one because everything started there for him. In a nod to his campaign slogan, "Telling it like it is," Christie said that he's the type of candidate that understands that truth and hard decision will lead to growth and opportunity tomorrow for every American in this country. So we're all very used to Governor Christie telling it like it is to the citizens of New Jersey, and now he will be doing that across the country. But Christie isn't the first New Jersey politician to be a contender for the Oval Office. Why, 7 other Jerseyans have either launched campaigns or been considered possible presidential candidates. Now, one of them was really victorious, and that was Woodrow Wilson. He was president, and he was also president of Princeton before he moved up to be and governor and then president of the United States. The other was a vice president, Garrett Hobart, and 2 ran in the same year, Steve Forbes and Bill Bradley. So now let me turn to review a few of the big issues that we took up in June. As the legislature wound down their session to allow the Assembly to go home to run their campaigns for election in November, we covered passage of the final state budget, the paid sick leave mandate, and out-of-network health care charges. So let me start with review of the state budget and its impact on businesses, and let me now turn it over to Andrew, who's going to take you through the very painful process of passing a budget in New Jersey.
Thank you, Melanie, and good morning, everyone. On Tuesday, June 23rd, the Democratic leaders in the Assembly and the Senate introduced their $35.3 billion budget. This was a $1.5 billion increase from the governor's original budget of $33.8 billion, which was proposed back in February. Their proposal also included a $3.1 billion payment into the pension fund. And speaking of pensions, as you remember, on June 9th, the New Jersey State Supreme Court issued their ruling on the funding of New Jersey's public employee pension system. The ruling stated that the governor and the legislature would not have to fund a $1.6 billion pension payment in the final weeks of the fiscal year 2015 state budget. This reversed a lower court ruling which was issued back in February. The court ruled that there is no contractual right under the state constitution to make the payment, noting that only voters can require long-term obligations that total more than 1% of the annual budget. In its opinion, the court said, quote, efforts to dedicate monies through legislative acts other than the Annual Appropriations Act have no binding effect. As a result of this ruling, the pension payment was a focal point of this budget season, which had far-reaching implications. Most notable, the budget proposed by the Democratic leadership included 2 major tax increases to help fund the $3.1 billion payment into the pension fund. However, these tax changes would have also put New Jersey's business community at a competitive disadvantage. These 2 proposals included a millionaire's tax, which was a 10.75% gross income tax on all income over $1 million. This piece of legislation also included a 25% earned income tax credit for working class families. The second proposal was a 1-year, 15% corporate business tax surcharge. NJBIA testified before committee and shared with the entire legislature our concerns on how these tax increases would send the wrong message to the business community, including those businesses in the state, as well as those businesses thinking about moving here to New Jersey. New Jersey businesses need predictability in policymaking to provide them with the confidence that they need in order to create jobs, to expand their business, and to grow the economy. The bill also included the completion of the 5-year phase-in of business tax reforms. NJBIA supported these reforms during their initial passage and praised Democratic leadership for choosing to include them in their budget plan. These tax cuts are beneficial to you as a business owner here in the state, whether you are a large or small business. The single sales factor reform provides tax relief to the larger corporate taxpayer that chooses to call New Jersey home. These are the companies that invest in our state with facilities and jobs, and this change eliminates what many consider to be an investment tax. With over 18 states utilizing or moving towards single sales factor, New Jersey needed this tax change to stay competitive. Reforms like the loss netting, net operating loss carry forward, and reduced minimum tax on S corporations provide much needed tax relief to small and medium-sized businesses in our state. These are the LLCs, the LLPs, S corporations, and sole proprietorships. NJBIA believes that any benefit to these companies in the form of tax relief is reinvested directly back into the company and used to create and retain jobs. Ultimately, the budget bill was released from both the Senate and Assembly budget committees by a party line vote. On Thursday, the budget bills were held for a floor vote before the entire Senate and Assembly, and after much discussion in both houses, they were released on party line votes. Both the millionaires tax and CBT surcharge bills were released from the Senate and the Assembly. However, NJBIA's comments did have an impact, as some members of the Assembly who voted to increase the income tax rate recognized the potential impact a CBT surcharge might have on the business community and voted against the measure. On Friday, June 26th, Governor Christie signed his final version of the budget with a few notable changes. These included an absolute veto of the 15% CBT surcharge, a conditional veto of the 10.75% millionaires tax, and in his conditional veto, Governor Christie returned the bill to the legislature, eliminating the income tax increase while increasing the earned income tax credit to 30% for working class families. The legislature acted on the bill on Monday to concur with the governor's changes. Governor Christie's budget also included a $1.3 billion pension payment, as well as a $212 million supplemental appropriation payment from the fiscal year 2015 budget to go towards the pension system. Now we'd like to turn the webinar back to Melanie Willoughby, who will discuss a few more hot-button issues here in Trenton.
Thank you, Andrew. Now I'd like to really talk about paid sick leave. It was a political football during the last days of the legislative session. The Assembly was determining to continue to deliberate the bill. As you know, it had come out of an Assembly committee, but had not yet been put up for a vote by the Assembly Speaker. However, Senate President Sweeney surprisingly decided to press for the bill to be voted out of a Senate committee and up for a vote before the full Senate in just 1 week's time. So we rallied the troops and asked all of you to send emails to the senators to vote no on the bill. And I want to thank all of the members out there who answered our call to action, because it worked. The bill was not voted on by the Senate on Monday. As a matter of fact, it was pulled from consideration, and this is a victory. We live to fight another day on the paid sick leave bill. The Assembly is now home until November, and the Senate is coming in July for 2 sessions, so we will have some room to continue to work on the bill. But let me remind you of some of the reasons we love to hate this new mandate proposal. First, sick leave mandates are going to hit seasonal businesses really hard. Many are staffed by part-time or temporary workers like students working a few shifts a week. It would really be a significant financial and administrative burden for those businesses to administer paid sick leave to so many part-time and temporary workers who are there for maybe 3 months out of the year. Second, no business wants to lose a good worker, so when companies can afford to provide sick leave, they typically will. Why, as a matter of fact, over 70% of our members tell us that they do provide some type of PTO policy. So this mandate would actually punish you if you're already providing sick leave to your employees by opposing a one-size-fits-all approach. And businesses in New Jersey are not just homogeneous. They have to be able to tailor their benefits and to customize their policies to meet individual workers' needs. And the sick leave mandate would take that ability away. Third, this is just another mandate piled on top of a minimum wage increase that's in our Constitution, federal health care reform, and higher payroll taxes. How much more can you really take? And fourth, in this economy, lawmakers should focus on creating more jobs, not making it harder for private sector employers to hire people and meet their payrolls by placing more and more financial requirements upon you. Fifth, creating a legal entitlement to paid sick leave carries with it government regulation, more paperwork, new legal liabilities for businesses that are already volunteering to offer this benefit to the workers. Now remember, there are 9 town ordinances out there that are already imposing sick leave. So it all started in October of 2013 when Jersey City became the first city in the state to enact its own sick leave ordinance. Then Newark followed, then Passaic, then East Orange, then Patterson, then Irvington, Montclair, and Trenton, where NJBIA has to follow the sick leave ordinance in Trenton. And believe me, it has been administrative nightmare, and we already had a robust sick leave policy. And then Bloomfield passed, and now we understand the town of Princeton is considering it. And our team is working with the businesses in Princeton on trying to block the Princeton proposal, because we believe that with a coalition of business organizations who stay strong and oppose the legislation, that we can definitely stop this mandate. So I urge you to visit our website at keepnjcompetitive.org. That's keepnjcompetitive.org, where you can get additional information, and for your reading time pleasure, all of the ordinances that exist in all the municipalities, if you happen to be a business that is in one of them. I'd now like to turn to another big issue that it impacts all of our members, because if you provide health insurance to your employees, then the out-of-network legislation is going to have an impact on you. It was introduced last month to attempt to limit the medical costs to insured patients receiving urgent or emergency care at an out-of-network facility. The bill is really an attempt to bring transparency and fairness in pricing for healthcare services that are out-of-network. So every year, just think about what's happened to you possibly. Thousands of New Jerseyans find themselves presented with a surprise medical bill from a doctor, like an anesthesiologist or a radiologist, who becomes involved in your care, but unbeknownst to you, is not covered by your insurance. In other cases, the individuals may have sought services from a hospital emergency department that was not in their insurer's network. And these problems that develop are really having a significant impact on the affordability of healthcare coverage. Now, NJBIA places a strong and consistent focus on the quality and affordability of health insurance in New Jersey. As a matter of fact, that is the reason that we've always been opposed to mandates on adding additional health care services, because we feel that they add to the cost, and that we want to be able to keep costs affordable so that more employers are going to be able to afford to provide them to their employees. And our survey of the Business Outlook survey has said that it is the top challenge facing the majority of our members, with 71% indicating it was their top concern. But our businesses did tell us that because it is so important to their employees as providing a member benefit to them, that they essentially have not dropped their coverage yet. But we want to make sure that we try to do things that are going to keep healthcare coverage costs at a reasonable price. Now, the present New Jersey law protects the consumers who buy fully insured health plans, so that consumers who follow the rules by using in-network hospitals will not be hit with unexpected healthcare charges from out-of-network providers. They just pay their in-network copay, and the same is true for emergency room visits. Now, however, this protection comes at a cost to the purchaser in the form of higher health insurance premiums. The bill is ultimately paid by the health insurance carrier, but often the amount is billed charges, or the highest rates the provider charges. Ultimately, this drives up your health insurance premiums because the costs get passed on. Now, we have members who are on many sides of this issue, and I just don't mean both sides. I mean many sides, because there are so many moving pieces to any piece of legislation that is going to attempt to deal with the out-of-network issue. But it's our goal here to try to balance the interests of all of our members and to reform one of the biggest cost drivers that negatively impact all employers. Why, did you know that health insurance premiums exceeded $4,823 for individual employees and $16,834 for family coverage? And that was according to the Kaiser survey of employer-sponsored health plans last year. When you have rising costs combined with continued climb out of the recession, it really results in a sharp drop in the number of people covered in New Jersey's small employer market. Why, in in the fourth quarter of 2014, we only had over 500,000 still participating in the market. But in fourth quarter of 2007, it was over 800,000. That is a significant drop. The complexities that are raised out of these out-of-network health situations have no easy solution. However, their costs are having a significant impact, as I said, on the affordability of healthcare coverage. Now, we have had many discussions with our member companies about their concerns and will continue to do so over the summer. As a matter of fact, 3 weeks ago, we had a roundtable discussion on the bill at NJBIA headquarters with the bill's sponsors, Senator Vitale, Assemblyman Coughlin, Scher, and Singleton, and over 90 NJBIA members participated in person as well as on our conference call. And we're going to be continuing those discussions. We are going to focus on a few simple things. We want simple system of disclosure and transparency and a fair resolution to disputed charges. It's important to strike this fair balance to ensure that facility-based providers are reasonably compensated, but also ensures that consumers or their insurers are not hit with unexpected, non-negotiable bills which drive small employer health insurance premiums even higher. And one last point about the bill. We've heard from many self-funded plans who are concerned about the language of the bill that includes companies under ERISA. The state cannot require self-funded plans to participate. The very core of ERISA is to have benefits that are consistent across all states for the employees. ERISA has its own rules that companies must follow for handling emergency care and claims appeals. And while the provisions of this bill are well-intentioned, ERISA companies are preempted from these requirements, and that's certainly an amendment that NJBIA will be pushing for. We recognize that there are no easy solutions to this problem, but it's important to have the conversation with the stakeholders who are in the healthcare delivery system and with our employers so that we have an easy process for disclosure and one that's going to help to bring out-of-network costs under control. I'd like to end with mentioning that your involvement in the public policy process is so critical. As you can see from Andrew's comments about the budget and from my comments about your input on paid sick leave, that it has an impact. The legislature needs to hear from you directly about how the issues they are deciding impact you every day. So we have lots of opportunities for you to participate. First, there are the policy committees where you can meet with legislators, and you need to join a policy committee, and you can do that by signing up online. And then there also are ELCs, which are employer legislative committee meetings, which meet monthly in each county except July and August. And usually you have legislators as the speakers, and we also have people in from the Christie administration who also like to speak. As a matter of fact, a well-known individual, Governor Chris Christie himself, made it to every single solitary ELC in 1 year, where he got to meet all of the ELC NJBIA members. And we actually gave him an award for making that trek. Now, don't forget to download our Legislative Directory app on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Android devices. It's really helpful. And we'll be updating it when the new legislature starts in January. You can also subscribe to New Jersey Business Today, our new email news service, to get the latest business news and all of the latest from NJBIA. The emails go out promptly at 4 p.m. Monday through Friday and at 8 on Saturday. So please check your phones for your email for your 4 o'clock NJBT. It's everything you need to know about what happened that day. You can go to the New Jersey Business Magazine's website, njbmagazine.com, and you can subscribe to the NJBT on the homepage. Thank you. And now we both, Andrew and I, look forward to your questions, and I'm throwing it back to Peter.
Thanks, Melanie. Again, I would underline that. We are going to be taking any and all of your questions between now and noontime. There's certainly a lot to discuss, both what occurred in the month of June and also a look ahead, which in many respects is more interesting and more kind of up in the air than what already occurred. So let's start off, and I'll direct the first question to Melanie, which is, we have an assembly election coming up in November, so presumably there's not going to be that much legislative activity between now and then. What are the items, the Senate's coming in the summer, what are the items that we might see the Senate and possibly the Assembly, if they decide they're coming back, act on between now and the election?
Peter, that's a really good point, coming certainly from our audience. We appreciate those questions. So the Assembly, as is usual and customary, when they're running for election, and they're going to be at the top of the ticket on the ballot in November, is that they like to keep a low profile so that they do not have any surprises that could be used against them by their opponents in running the election. So most likely the Assembly may not come back, although we know that the Senate is planning on returning in July. But what could happen is that there might be some pressure coming to put a question on the ballot in November for casino gambling to be able to occur outside of Atlantic City. There's a lot of controversy around this issue and whether or not that ballot question would be put on the ballot. It would have to be decided by both houses by a 3/5 vote to put it on the ballot first time and it would have to be done by the beginning of August. But if they do not pass the casino gambling ballot question this year, they could do it by a simple majority, so that the following year they would have to do a simple majority, and then it could go on the ballot in November of 2016. And that certainly would be a big year, because that would be a presidential election, and you always have so many more people that come out to vote in a presidential than you ever do in a legislative election. And the hope is that the more people that come out to vote, then the higher the likelihood would be that they would vote for the casino gambling to occur in northern Jersey. But the question is whether or not the casino gambling opportunity for New Jersey would pass if we don't get it on the ballot in November. But that right now is a political football going back and forth between the North and the South leadership in New Jersey.
And Melanie, just a quick follow-up on that. Do you see any path to where that could be overcome? Clearly there are legislators in South Jersey who would feel one way, and legislators in North Jersey who might feel another, and legislators all over the place who might envision a casino in their district. So is this one of those things that it'll be very difficult to accomplish?
It's really anyone's guess as to what's truly going to happen with this issue. As usual in politics, there are trade-offs that are made, and so it'll be interesting to see what trade-offs might occur as a result of who would like another issue perhaps to be done, and so casino gambling would be the trade. But as of right now, the Assembly is not slated to come back, and only the Senate is. So we'll have to see what the agendas will look like as to whether casino gambling is going to happen. I might add that when it happened back in the 70s, it was up in the ballot the first time, and it didn't pass. And that's because there was no focus as to where the casino gambling would occur. Now it passed the second time, and they focused on Atlantic City. So the belief was that once they put the casino gambling in Atlantic City, then people knew what they were voting for and they were willing to pass it. So it would be hard to have a ballot question that would just put the gaming anywhere in North Jersey. Likelihood, based on past history, is that that would not pass.
We have a question about pensions, and I'll direct this first to Andrew in a general way, and I'm not sure we can specifically answer that question. If we can't, we will get the answer to you later on via email. But Andrew, if you could talk about your assessment of where we are with the pension debate. Is this one of those things that now that the budget process is over, people are going to forget about it for a while, that there's no pressing reason to do it. You hear things like the Republicans, the Democrats are trying to get the governor to make payments earlier than he had in the past throughout the year rather than paying at the end. So or maybe Melanie would rather take this, but essentially, is this thing, are we going to go on to other issues, or is the pension debate going to continue on through the summer, on through the fall, and into next year?
Well, Peter, Andrew and I have just conferred, and we've decided that I'm going to take this weighty question because the pension debate is one in which it's all about where's the money going to come from in order to be able to fully fund the pension as it's presently constituted. And what the governor would like is there to be a reform of the pension and of the health care delivery to the state workers as well. So I think that that is the conversation that is going to continue. And I know that the Pension Reform Committee is actually going to be speaking out and talking about how these reforms are what the state needs to do in order to be able to make its commitments now and in the future, because it's not sustainable, which is the bottom line. We cannot continue to go at the level we're going with the pensions at the way they're constituted and the healthcare product the way that's constituted, because it's a Cadillac system. And we do not have the ability to sustain it. So I think that because of the Supreme Court ruling that they did not have to pay for the full pension benefit, that the discussions broke down, but they will come back and they will be definitely a very big part of the conversation as we move into next year's budget.
And getting on to our pension question, it's from Robert Murray, and I've already said we may not specifically have the answer to the question right now, but we will get it for you. But Robert's just wondering, of the total pension program, what portion is paid by the teachers versus the state? And he says, e.g. 80% versus 20% or what? And, we heard statistics from the governor at his press conference where what is paid into the system by the recipients is far, far less than what they take out of the system. That might lead one to believe that the state's payment is overwhelmingly higher than that which is paid in, but I don't know the percentage. Perhaps you can address that in a fuller way.
Peter, thank you, and thank you for that question. We will have to actually look into what the actual percentage is between what the teachers pay and what the state workers pay, and then what percentage of that is also paid by, the local municipalities and their workers, and we'll have to get back to you on that. But I think the bottom line is looking at the actual structure of the pension system and what is it that can be sustained by government if they have a slow growth, and what cannot, and to make those changes. Businesses have recognized that actuarially they cannot sustain the defined pension system, and that they actually needed to make those changes because people are living so much longer, and their retirement is now moving from 5-10 years of pension payout to now 20-30 years of pension payout, and just those numbers alone actuarially are not sustainable. So that is the reason that reform is necessary, and that because New Jersey's governors and legislatures for decades have kicked the can down the road and not been willing to fund the pension system, and have at the same time made additions to the system where they were increasing what your pension payment would be, they were reducing your retirement years, all of that prior to the changes that were made by Governor Christie and together with this legislature, that has not helped the matters. So we really believe that everyone has to essentially recognize that compromise is critical in order to save the state's budget and pension going forward.
Andrew, I'd like to talk a little bit about the BEEP program for a minute. That was one of the governor's big proposals. We found, or our position always was, we thought the governor's initial budget was a good business-friendly budget. We had the completion of the tax reduction program and a variety of taxes, but the other part of this was ensuring that those that had been promised these funds had access to them in some way, because these are the companies that had been approved for the grants, but had, because it was part of the appropriations process, had never seen the money. The money would always be taken out of the budget. So this was kind of another way to go about it, but ultimately it didn't happen as part of the budget process. So why don't you talk a little bit about what the BEEP program is, what the governor wanted to do to make the money more available, and then what happened at the last minute that it just sort of became, ended up on the back burner and didn't become part of the final budget.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, and just to kind of recap, the governor's original proposal back in February called for changing the payment of BEEP grants into refundable tax credit for companies that had already created jobs and investment here in the state. And a lot of times companies created these jobs and investment by moving to New Jersey, and the BEEP program was very successful. And while we were hoping that this would be done prior to the conclusion of the June budget cycle this year, since it didn't have a direct impact on the fiscal year 2016 state budget, that's kind of why it didn't happen before the end of June this year. But it is going to be a top priority for NJBIA going forward over the summer and into the fall as we work for a resolution to the BEEP program for our members and for all the businesses here in the state that have those outstanding grants.
Thanks, Andrew. On to our next favorite topic, more about paid sick leave. This is if you enjoy this kind of thing, and I'm not sure that our government affairs folks who had to talk about this with the legislature actually enjoyed it, but if you're an observer and you like politics, the whole thing is pretty fascinating. So I know, Melanie, this question is for you. First part is, in a recent ELEC report, it turns out that paid sick leave was the most heavily lobbied issue of the year. Like there should be some kind of award for that, I suppose. So what is it about this issue that brought it? Because you wouldn't ordinarily see something like that. So what is it about this issue that makes it so kind of both sides so kind of on the edge of their seats to try to affect the legislation in a certain way? And the second part of the question is, politically, what's happening with this? Because at one point it was going to go through the Assembly, and we had always said, well, we don't know if the Senate's going to do it, and then the Senate kind of jumped in and was going to do it and then didn't do it, and then nothing happened. So is anything going to happen? So first part, why this issue, and then sort of what's happening with this? Why didn't it happen? What's going to happen? Is it ever going to happen?
Yes, paid sick leave is definitely a very contentious issue, and it's actually very contentious because businesses believe that they already are doing the right thing in providing the benefits to their employees, and they're providing those benefits in a way that is going to resemble their business model. So if you are have a lot of part-time individuals, you are going to allow those part-timers to have time off, but that if they're taking the time, that they actually find a replacement. Well, the bill, as is presently constituted, doesn't allow you to find your own replacement. It is totally up to the business. So there are those parts of the bill that absolutely are so irritating as to be directing business to determine how they're going to run their HR department. So that's number one. Number two is that it is an additional cost because of all of the regulatory and administrative requirements, and so putting additional costs on business at any time is obviously a no-no, because businesses want to be able to put their money back into their business to provide employees with benefits and to be able to hire more people, and that is not a possibility when government steps in and intervenes in how they're going to provide, they want business to provide their benefits. And third, you've got a lot of questions around the whole preemption clause. And what does that mean? Well, the Working Families group, who have been the advocates for a paid sick leave policy, have worked very hard to get ordinances passed in all of the municipalities that they've been successful in so far. And those were the 9 that I had given you the list of. So because they were successful in these municipalities, they would like to ensure that there is no preemption so that they can continue to get ordinances passed in municipalities across the state. We in the business community believe that we would like, if there is ever to be a paid sick mandate, that there is preemption so that we have one standard across the state. So that if I've got, like NJBIA does, if I've got employees who actually are in Fairfield and I've got employees in Trenton, that I have one standard versus now having to follow 2 because there might be a Fairfield ordinance someday and now I have a Trenton ordinance. So we would like to have preemption throughout the state. And my understanding is that the Working Families Coalition does not want preemption. So that's been one of the big sticking points in the entire debate between what the legislators have been willing to do, because a lot of them have said, you know, they would like to have a statewide standard. And so that debate continues and has continued in the Assembly. And in the Senate, that debate was occurring, but the Senate said, well, we'll have preemption for every municipality going forward, but we'll grandfather in those 9 municipalities that already have ordinances. Well, that doesn't address any of the difficulties that exist with the fact that you would already have 9 ordinances. And for NJBIA, for instance, if we had a state law we'd have to adhere to, and the Trenton ordinance, you know, and now for Fairfield, where we have employees, they would be under the state law, they wouldn't be under the Trenton ordinance. So it would be very confusing for employers, and so many small businesses trying to adhere to this policy would really be impacted very negatively. So the battle continues and is waged between the Senate and the Assembly, where they have completely different versions of the bill, and they haven't been able to reach agreement, and we are hopeful that we can work with the legislators over the summer to try to demonstrate to them the difficulties with some of the amendments that they've come up with so far that only complicate the issue even more.
Let's move over to another of our favorite topics, the estate and inheritance tax. We've been talking about that a lot. There is no real movement apparently yet in the legislature, even though we've heard public statements indicating that there was general agreement that one, if not both of these taxes need to be adjusted. So, Andrew, have you been picking up anything over at the State House that this is on anyone's radar? And if not, what do you foresee, if anything, happening over the next 6 months? And piggybacking on that, what are the issues that we find with the estate and inheritance tax? Why do we spend so much time talking about it, and what are the issues inherent in continuing the taxes at those levels?
Yeah, and I'll start with the, thank you, Peter. I'll start with the second part of your question first. I think one of the big things we hear from our business owners is that the estate and inheritance taxes really have an impact on them in the final, the final years when they're a business owner. And the impact of those taxes determine what those business owners might do with their business when they're no longer operating it, in terms of whether they're going to pass it down to their family, or whether they may move to another state and operate the business there, or whether they may just close down the business and sell it because their family is not able to avoid some of the taxes in regards to the estate inheritance tax. The first part of your question, earlier this spring and into the past winter, you did hear some discussions about raising of the $675,000 threshold of the estate tax in regards to how it may be a trade-off for an increase in the gas tax. Now, as we have gotten closer to the summer here, those conversations have died down primarily because of the assembly elections this fall. And as Melanie mentioned earlier, when the assembly is at the top of the ticket, a lot of times they like to keep a low profile into the summer and into the early fall before the election. So I don't think you're going to see any movement on those prior to November, but it is something that we're keeping our eye on, and we will watch as we move past the November elections and into the winter when it may come back up.
Trust fund. There may not be, there may be in lame duck, we really don't know, but if you couple that with some of the things we've been talking about, Melanie, about the need to expand beyond transportation and talk about, it's sort of, this all happened many years ago with the Transportation Trust Fund just because there was no way to pay for projects at that point, but the realization, at least is in this building, that infrastructure is water, sewer, energy related, communications related. There's lots of infrastructure that doesn't seem to be addressed in the Transportation Trust Fund debate. So where are we with TTF, and sort of how do we make the other parts of infrastructure part of the debate?
The infrastructure debate is not only waging on the state level, but also on the national level, where you have major discussion about the fact that the funding that is required to be able to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure has not been invested in a long time, and that we have pipes and lines in New Jersey that were built 100 years ago, and my gosh, some of them lasted 100 years, but now we need to address it. And so of course, it's always a question for business, which is what is going to be the benefit to my bottom line with this investment, and how much does this mean that I will have to pay in increased rates, but then what will this mean to me in the long term, because I will now have a road structure that is going to be able to be utilized by my delivery people, and I'm not going to have congestion for my employees to get to work, and I'm also not going to have water mains that are going to burst and close down my business for days because of the reconstruction. And so these are all the questions that I think need to be really thoughtfully considered by our policy makers as well as by our businesses. And NJBIA plans on bringing these folks together to have these meaningful discussions in infrastructure roundtables, where we talk about our infrastructure for water and sewer and utilities and also transportation, because we think we need a comprehensive approach that can be done, over a span of 30 years. But if we don't start now, we're only going to be, running to patch a hole here and patch a bridge there, and this kind of patchwork is what has caused so many, issues, especially in a state as old as New Jersey. I mean, remember, we were one of the original 13 colonies, and some of the roads I've been traveling on feel like they were built back, in the colonial days. So I do think that we all recognize that infrastructure is an important investment we need to make. It's just a question of how much and when, and equitably making those investments.
And for the both of you, I think I'd be remiss if we didn't, before we end, talk about the governor's announcement, which came yesterday. And we just have a general question here. Either one of you could take, but New Jersey is clearly over the next few months going to be in the spotlight. What's happened here, the impact of the governor's policies, so forth and so on. How will this impact the state, if at all? Is there any impact, or is it a situation where the governor's running for president over here and business continues as usual over here and there's really no overlap?
Well, I think the first thing is that it's always great to have one of your own, running for president, because you essentially do highlight, New Jersey, and New Jersey has gotten, in the past some comedic comments that we have, I think, grown out of. But when you highlight what's good about New Jersey, that can be done by someone who from your state is running for office. I also think that it's an opportunity for Chris Christie, who has been, a great advocate for business, to take that message out to the rest of the country. And he's been an advocate for small business, and that's really important in helping our folks on Main Street in their growth and development, and also in innovation. And the growth of our own bioscience industry in New Jersey is another great opportunity for us to highlight that. And so I think there's a lot of positives here. Certainly, we're going to miss him because he will be doing a lot of traveling, and that probably means that he will not be in the state. But we will get to see our Lieutenant Governor, who has been doing a great job, and she will continue to help move our agenda along.
Thank you, Melanie, and that's about all the time we have today, so unfortunately we will have to bring things to a close. Don't forget, all of you will be receiving a recording of today's webinar via email, and you will be getting the PowerPoint presentation via email as well. And if you can see it on the screen, we have provided you today with a link so that you may download the PowerPoint now so you can have it and review it, and you don't have to wait for us to email it to you. Last of all, we will be sending you a survey that we hope you'll fill out so we can understand how best to provide you important information in a webinar format in the future. Our next Live from the Capitol webinar, or Live from the State Capitol webinar, will take place on August 12th, discussing the major political and policy issues in Trenton, almost assuredly including the Senate's visit to Trenton in July. Our President and Chief Executive Officer, Michelle Sekurka, will have her Ask the President webinar on July 23rd, and on July 15th, we'll have a webinar on how you can save energy for your company. All of our webinars